I'm Jill Hunter, and I was a director of pharmacy in a 503B pharmacy, and I'm here to help you figure out how to do automation on a budget so that your CFO is happy with you and the FDA is happy with you at the end of the day. I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. The objectives: to understand the importance of working with the CFO to establish a minimum return on investment, establish vendors as partners and work with them to determine whether you need full automation, semi-automated, or a digital assistant to help you. Review implementation strategies required in-house by manufacturer validation, as well as SOPs and training. And personally, my objective was always on the next page. And that personal objective was to avoid wearing orange, because I know if I make the wrong decision and someone dies, not only do I have the guilt of that on my consciousness, but I could be fined $250,000 for each person and spend a year in prison. So the question is automation actually worth it? The global market for pharmacy automation should grow from $5.1 billion in 2019 to $7.8 billion in 2024. And note that this was pre-COVID. I'm expecting that this number might even be higher, knowing that it's really hard for machines to transmit COVID. And I'm thinking that people are going to be automating even more than we expected originally. But they're showing a CAGR growth rate of 8.6%. And I'm watching in the past. I know that Lee Bush did a presentation in the opportunities track recently and was talking about the vending machine of the future. I'm going to take you back in time for just a minute. And I watched Baker Cell pill counting systems come and go. I watched Script Pro come in and make a huge impact in retail pharmacy. Finally, I saw doses transform unit dosing. And at the same time, evolution happened in the IV world, where TPN compounders came in. And first they only did the main fluids. So then the next versions of TPN compounders came, and you could have electrolytes that didn't have to be added by hand. You could spike the vials and have the machine add everything for TPNs. And I've also watched dosage technology come in and add confidence to IV pharmacists who aren't watching what the technician's doing in the hood, but they can actually see afterward what actually happened. Now, this slide is busy. The main points I want to point out are that while a few occupations are fully automatable, 60% have at least of occupations can have at least 30% technically automatable activities within it. Think about what our technicians do every day. Our technicians are doing predictable physical activities, which is this part here on the slide. So predictable activities, physical activities, you have 81% success in automating that. So I'm thinking that the things that our technicians do routinely, the manual manipulations that they do, is where we can actually do the automation and see the bang for the buck. Next, I'm going to talk about a case study. And this was something that I faced in how to scale in a limited space, physical space in the building at a 503B compounding center. It was taking us, and these are generally massaged numbers. I'm not going to disclose anything from my prior employer. One batch of syringes was 1,000 syringes. It would take one compounding technician all day to compound. And then it would take more than 8 hours to visually inspect those 1,000 syringes the next day and to label them. So I see 3 opportunities here to be able to automate. Are you going to automate compounding? are you going to automate visual inspection, or are you going to automate labeling? So that's the one thing that I really want to look at is what are we going to do next? So the first thing, we looked at the Holy Grail. Well, let's automate the whole thing. Let's look at a machine that can compound and fill the syringes. You put in all the inputs and out the end spits a syringe that's filled. And what's great about this is I call it an enclosed robot. It's awesome because the inside environment is your ISO 5 environment, and your chances of contamination are very low. The wrong potency is very unlikely to happen, and even excursions would be very low. But it was too expensive. So we decided not to do that. But one thing I did look at is here, there's 4 different ways that they looked at the process: manual, robotic, semi-automatic, and robotic. On manual, they had technicians make different doses of acyclovir in a hood and see how many bags they could compound in an hour. And they ended up compounding an average of 5 bags an hour, plus or minus 1.7. The robot was actually slower than the technician because of the different doses. So it was on demand, tailor-made, and the robot could only do 4 bags an hour. Then we looked at a technician using a repeater pump and pooling the solution. So making a pooled solution, then using a repeater pump and pumping out different doses of acyclovir. They were actually able to do 12 bags an hour. And then a full robot who was only going to do 1 dose of acyclovir an hour at a time, or at least for that whole hour that they analyzed it, was only able to make 8 bags an hour. So it did not make sense to buy a robot that could only do 8 bags an hour on a standard solution, knowing, and we would be doing standard solutions in a 503B pharmacy, but it didn't make sense to do that, knowing that we were already using the semi-automatic option where we were able to compound 12 bags an hour. So we ruled out the compounding piece. The next piece was, can we get a visual inspection system that can inspect the syringes instead of having a human do it? And this is an example of a machine, Cognex Insight. They actually use this in big pharma, but the costs were even higher than that of a full compounding robot. So we decided to leave that to pharma and start looking at our last area of compounding: how to quickly and efficiently label syringes. There's an example of the syringes that we had, and this is a picture of, I'm guessing, because I didn't take the picture, about 500 syringes in that tote. A batch of 1,000 would have 2 totes that size. And so trying to figure out how to compound them ended up sometimes like this, except for this is not. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so I have a little video. So my point there was to show that if you get the right automation, it works. If you get the wrong automation, it doesn't work. And I think there are days that we have felt like Lucy on that line of going, oh my gosh, we are in over our heads and we need to work a little faster. So we need to determine what the right requirements of automation are before you actually go out and source a vendor. And I really recommend working with quality to determine these needs. Because if they don't meet your needs, even though it might be the best option that you can find, you still should not do it. They really need to meet your needs, or you're going to find that there's other parts of your process that fall apart after you put it into place. So I want you to pick top 3 vendors. Your CFO is going to want you to get quotes from 3 different vendors. So pick top 3 vendors that you're interested in, request product demos, ask for quotes from all 3. Ask them in the quote to say what the cost is and the time to deliver, because they might say, hey, it only costs $10,000 to do this, but it's going to take 3 years to deliver it to you. It's not going to work. So I just wanted to go into a quick demonstration of what full automation is, because videos tend to be worth 1,000 words. And then let me show you an example of a semi-automated machine, just so you get an idea of the difference. It's easy for me to show you. Okay, my presentation just went away. Give me a second to get it back up. Okay, we're back. Don't know why that died. So the next slide is to how do you calculate ROI? So what is ROI first? It's your return on investment. And how do you calculate it using, first you need to calculate what today's costs are for a batch. So just look at it that way. Is the loaded labor cost per hour, you're going to need to go to finance and ask the question. I think ours came in at $32 an hour or something around that. So it's the cost of the technician plus all of their benefits. Then you want to take the number of hours to produce a batch. So have someone actually time it, figure out how many hours it is to produce one batch. Then you look at the cost of the materials to produce that batch and take the loaded labor costs per hour, multiply by the number of hours, add in the cost of materials, and that's today's cost. Next thing you need to do is look at, say you were going from that center manual process, here, manual process in this area. So say you were going from that over to the semi-automatic process, you would need to look at, okay, well, in the semi-automatic process, I not only need to look at the pump that I'd be putting into place, I'd also need to buy a scale and possibly an HPLC machine. And those should be part of your cost, not in the cost of the actual, it's in your new cost of materials to produce a batch, but it doesn't go into the cost of the pump per se that you would be doing. And then in the robot scenario, you would simply be using the cost of the robot, and you wouldn't need anything else in that room. So now you need to do the same calculation and calculate your future cost. The estimated loaded labor cost per hour. Say you need to hire technicians at a higher price point because of what they're going to be doing. They need to be more skilled. That might increase your loaded labor cost per hour. It might also decrease because you don't need a skilled person to operate a machine. Estimate the number of new hours to join that batch, produce that batch, and then estimate the new cost of materials, including those extra things like the scale or the HPLC machine that you might need to do the new production method. So the same calculation as before, the loaded labor cost per hour times the number of hours, and then add in the new cost of materials, and that's your future cost. Look at how many batches you'll be able to produce a month. So take today's cost minus the future cost, multiply it by the number of batches per month, it equals your cost per month. Now is where you take your cost of the automation, this is the quote that you got from your vendor, and you divide that by the change in cost per month, and that equals your return on investment in months. I have a copy of this that you can download. It's an ROI calculator for you where you would input everything in purple, and the data in the black cells will auto-populate, so you can change your loaded labor cost per hour. I had $32 here. I have the cost of the automation is $70,000, had us producing 110 batches per month, and it was 4 hours to produce a batch. In the future, I still have 110 batches per month, but it would only take us 1 hour to produce that batch as far as the labeling is concerned. The cost of labels per batch would be slightly less, so you'd be saving $3 a batch. There, I have wasted labels per batch would hopefully go down from $2 to $1, and the ink to print on the current labels is expensive, so it's $5 per batch, and having that drop down to $3. When all of this comes out, you get an ROI of 6.2 months. What I'm saying is, and this is a key learning for you, it's not one of the quiz questions at the end, but a key learning for you is that when a CFO sees an ROI of 6 months, they are going to approve that request and say, how come we didn't do this sooner? The magic number that a CFO looks for is 18 months on a return on investment. If you can show that by buying this machine and putting it into your pharmacy, that you will end up getting your money back, which is your return on investment, in 18 months or less, your CFO is going to say, yes, let's do it. They might say, are you sure? They might challenge you, but at least now I've told you like the magic of what you're looking for and how to make that CFO happy. So the next step is to write SOPs for the automation. Request an outline or skeleton from the vendor. They will have these in a lot of times if they've been working with industry before. So don't start from scratch. Start from a skeleton that they can provide for you. Have a vendor train a super user on your staff to be your in-house trainer. And then have quality review the SOP before going live with the automation. Basically, you're trying to make sure that quality has buy-in in this and that they look at things differently than pharmacists do. And they're your partners, so you want to make sure that they help you succeed. And so I still really recommend working with quality. The next part is the automation implementation timeline. This is actually slide 1 of 2, just to let you know there are 10 steps. And this will be part of the question at the end, is the order of events here. So the first is get your quote, then make your purchase. Then you're going to train the trainer. Next, you're going to validate. So you're going to, you can do the train the trainer before the machine actually gets implemented or brought into your facility. Next, you need to do a validation. And at the same time that you're doing validation, you can start writing your SOPs. Once the SOPs are written, you can train your staff. You can do your first production run. And then, because it's a production run, you're going to have your quality review, your release, and then you're going to go and you're going to ship the product to the customer. And I know this is second nature for all of you, but I just figured I'd put it in the timeline to make it easier to remember what goes where. So given all the information I've shared with you today, I'm hoping that you can see yourself wearing one of these 2 uniforms in the future. And I still go with the mantra, I don't look great in white, but I look worse in orange. So I'm definitely going for looking at wearing the white on the right. I want to say, just mention this quote here because I know this happens too much in pharmacy. It's the only real prison we have is fear, and the only real freedom is freedom from fear. And we need to treat our employees not like they're in prison or going to go to prison. And we need to have them work in environments not like Lucy and afraid of getting fired. We need them to work in environments where they feel supported, and then there's no fear of retaliation if they point out a mistake to you. And that's the only way that quality works. In a quality environment, you need to make sure that your employees are willing to be able to come to you with problems, with issues. I'm going to go over the ACPE questions. We're going to define ROI. When selecting a vendor, which of the following criteria is an absolute must-have? We're going to select the correct order of events to implement automation. And who's the best person to write your standard operating procedures? So the first question is to define ROI. Is it A, revenue of implementation, B, review of interest, C, return on investment, or D, ratio on interest rate? And I'm just going to say, I would think that most of you get that. Second question is, when selecting a vendor, which of the following criteria is an absolute must-have? A, lowest cost proposal, B, shortest time to delivery, C, full automation machine, or D, a vendor passed qualification? And I was just going to say, you're not going to go with the lowest cost. You're not going to go with the person that can get it to you tomorrow. and you certainly probably can't afford a full automation in most 503Bs. Select the correct order of events to implement automation. A is you do your training, then you write your SOPs, then next you do your validation, and then you do your first production run. B is validation, then write SOPs, then do your training, and finally do your first production run. C is first production run, write SOPs, training, and then you validate last. D is write your SOPs, do your training, first production run, and then you validate last. And I think all of us know you have to validate what you're doing before you write your SOPs and do your training. You can do it simultaneously by writing SOPs, but you want to make sure everything's validated, everything works perfectly before you finalize your SOPs. Then do your training of your team, and then do your first production run is the last thing you're going to do. Who is the best person to write your standard operating procedures? That super user or trainer of your staff, a quality control team member. C is manufacturer of an automated device, basically outsource it, or D, director of pharmacy. I think everyone would agree that the best use of your time and money is that super user or trainer on your staff. Sure, a director of pharmacy is capable of doing it, but it is not worth their time to be spent doing that. If you want to download that ROI calculator, here's the link to it. You can get it in the notes afterward. And I just want to say, do you have any questions? I don't see any in the chat at this point. I am going to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so are there any questions on our automation video today?
If there are any questions, you can just raise your hands or put them in the chat. No? Okay. Well, Jill, thank you very much. I'm sorry for the technical issues, but it was a really great presentation. We are going to all go for a break, and we're going to come back here at 2:45 East Coast time. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great, have a good half hour, and we'll see you all back.